The interstellar conference station Meridian Point hung in the neutral zone between three galactic territories, its crystalline spires catching light from a distant binary star system. Inside the main assembly hall, representatives from dozens of worlds gathered for what historians would later call the most pivotal diplomatic summit in galactic history. Ambassador Kira Chen moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her unremarkable human appearance allowing her to blend seamlessly among the more exotic alien dignitaries. At barely 5 feet tall, with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes, she looked more like someone's grandmother than humanity's chief diplomatic strategist. Near the central platform, Admiral Vorakesh of the Hegemony held court. The massive 4-armed warrior's exoskeleton gleamed with biometallic enhancements, each segment inscribed with battle honors spanning 3 centuries. His voice, artificially amplified through vocal modulators, boomed across the gathering. The Hegemony's expansion brought order to 47 star systems, Vorakesh declared, his primary arms gesturing while his secondary ones remained crossed. Before our arrival, these regions were plagued by piracy, resource conflicts, and technological stagnation. We provided structure, purpose, and advancement. The circle of younger delegates listened with rapt attention. Among them, Kira noticed several species that had recently joined the Galactic Council, most still learning the complex dance of interstellar politics. "Tell us about the siege of Castoria Prime," urged a young Altarian, her feathers shifting through excited color patterns. "The battle that lasted 200 days? Vorakesh's compound eyes glittered with what might have been pleasure. "Ah, Castoria. The defenders thought their orbital defense grid was impenetrable. 27 layers of overlapping shields, automated weapon platforms, even a gravity well generator." He paused dramatically. "They failed to account for hegemony determination. We sacrificed an entire fleet division to overload their systems, then struck with precision at their exposed power cores." "Brilliant tactics," murmured someone in the crowd. Kira, who had been examining a holographic display of trade routes, looked up with mild interest. 200 days is quite a long time for a siege," she observed pleasantly. "The defenders must have been remarkably resourceful." Vorakesh's attention snapped to her, his combat implants automatically analyzing threat levels. Finding none from the small human, he relaxed slightly. "Ambassador Chen, I wasn't aware Earth's representatives had arrived." "We try not to make a fuss," Kira said with a warm smile. "Though I'm curious about Castoria. 200 days suggests the defenders had something worth protecting. Infrastructure? Technology?" "Their stubbornness," Vorakesh replied dismissively. "The Castoria were a proud species. They chose destruction over accepting hegemony membership." Kira's tone remained conversational, but something in her posture shifted minutely. "The siege was thorough," Vorakesh said. "When a species proves incompatible with galactic civilization, sometimes hard choices must be made. The hegemony bears such burdens so others don't have to." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The fate of the Castoria was well known. Their homeworld had been stripped of life, turned into a mining operation for the hegemony's war machine. "Fascinating perspective," Kira said, her fingers dancing over her holographic display. "Though I wonder if we might be defining civilization too narrowly. After all, the Castoria had maintained peaceful relations with their neighbors for what was it, 3,000 years before the hegemony arrived?" Vorakesh's secondary arms uncrossed a sign of agitation among his species. "Peace without progress is stagnation. The hegemony brings advancement." Of course, Kira agreed readily. "Though it's interesting how different species define progress. Take humans, for instance. We spent most of our early spacefaring years convinced that bigger weapons and faster ships were the ultimate measures of advancement." "And you were correct," Vorakesh interjected. "Military superiority ensures survival." Kira tilted her head thoughtfully. "Does it, though? I mean, certainly it's one strategy. But we discovered something curious when we started studying galactic history. Would you like to hear it?" Without waiting for a response, she expanded her holographic display, showing a complex web of data. Every major military power in recorded galactic history follows a remarkably similar pattern. Rapid expansion through superior force, a period of dominance lasting between 500 and 800 years, then sudden collapse. Every single one. Civilizations rise and fall, Vorakesh said dismissively. This proves nothing except that the weak are eventually replaced by the strong. That's one interpretation, Kira acknowledged. But we noticed something else. The collapses never came from external conquest. They were always internal. Resource depletion, overextension, rebellion from within. The very strategies that created the empire became the seeds of its destruction. She gestured, and the display showed a progression of fallen empires. The Antaran supremacy, the Mokari constellation, the First Galactic Republic. All convinced their military might made them invincible. All gone now. The hegemony is different, Vorakesh insisted, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Is it? Kira asked gently. How many resources do you devote to maintaining control over your 47 systems? How many ships patrol to prevent rebellion? How much of your economy goes to military production versus infrastructure, education, or scientific research? Our military ensures stability. Does it create stability, or does it create the need for more military to maintain control? Kira interrupted smoothly. It's a fascinating feedback loop. The more force you use to maintain order, the more resistance you create, requiring more force. Eventually, the system becomes unsustainable. The crowd around them had grown, drawn by the unexpected philosophical debate. Representatives from various worlds listened intently, many recognizing their own histories in Kira's analysis. You speak as if there's an alternative, Vorakesh challenged. Without military strength, the galaxy would descend into chaos. Kira's smile grew slightly. Would it? Humans thought the same thing for most of our history. Nations armed themselves against each other, creating ever more destructive weapons. We came within moments of self-annihilation multiple times. Yet you survived, Vorakesh pointed out, through strength. Through learning, Kira corrected. We realized that the resources spent on destruction could be used for creation, that cooperation yielded better results than conquest. It took us centuries and nearly cost us everything, but we finally understood. True strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies, it's the ability to transform them into allies. Naive idealism, Vorakesh scoffed, but his response lacked conviction. Is it? Kira touched her display, bringing up economic data. Let's look at the numbers. The hegemony spends 73% of its GDP on military and control systems. Your economic growth has been negative for the past 6 quarters. 3 of your frontier systems are experiencing food shortages because agricultural resources were diverted to ship construction. Vorakesh's compound eyes widened. This was classified information. Meanwhile, Kira continued, the Cooperative Trade Alliance, that weak collection of peaceful worlds you've dismissed, has experienced 400% economic growth over the past decade. Their combined technological advancement rate exceeds the hegemony's by a factor of 12. They're not building warships. They're building universities, research stations, and cultural exchange programs. How do you know our classified economic data? Vorakesh demanded. Kira's expression became sympathetic. Admiral, did you really think we were as naive as we appeared? Humans have been members of the galactic community for barely 50 years. In that time, we've been dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated by every major power. It's been educational. You've been gathering intelligence, Vorakesh said slowly, pieces falling into place. We've been learning, Kira corrected. Not through espionage, we didn't need to. Your own member worlds have been sharing information with us. Do you know why? She didn't wait for an answer. Because we offer something the hegemony doesn't, genuine partnership. We share technology freely. We respect local customs and autonomy. We help worlds develop their own strengths rather than exploiting their resources. The hegemony has protected the galaxy from chaos for centuries, Vorakesh protested, but his voice was losing its commanding tone. Protected it, or prolonged it? Kira asked. Every world you've conquered, every species you've subjugated, they're not grateful for your protection. They're waiting for weakness. And that waiting, that resentment, requires ever more resources to suppress. She pulled up another display. Would you like to know how many of your loyal member worlds have been in secret negotiations with the cooperative? The number might surprise you. Vorakesh's 4 hands clenched. Around them, delegates from hegemony member worlds were noticeably avoiding eye contact with the Admiral. This summit, Kira continued, wasn't really about trade agreements or border disputes. It was about offering every world a choice. Continue with the old patterns of conquest and control, or try something different. And if the hegemony refuses this choice? Vorakesh's threat was clear, but it rang hollow. Kira's grandmother's smile returned. Then you'll continue exactly as you have been, spending more resources on control, facing more resistance, dealing with more equipment failures and unfortunate accidents in your fleet. How many ships have you lost in the past year to such incidents, Admiral? The number was classified, but Vorakesh's reaction confirmed it was significant. You see, Kira explained patiently, we don't need to defeat the hegemony militarily. We just need to offer a better alternative and let mathematics do the rest. Every world that joins the cooperative strengthens us and weakens the old system. It's not war, it's evolution. You planned this, Vorakesh said, genuine respect creeping into his voice despite himself. This entire summit, drawing all the major powers here. We suggested it, Kira admitted. But the real architects were your own member worlds. They're tired, Admiral. Tired of sending their resources to build warships. Tired of seeing their young people conscripted for wars of conquest. Tired of living in fear. She gestured around the assembly hall. Look around. How many hegemony uniforms do you see compared to when you arrived? Vorakesh looked. Many delegates who had been wearing hegemony insignia had quietly removed them during the conversation. This is treason, he said, but the word lacked force. This is choice, Kira replied. The same choice we're offering the hegemony. Join the cooperative as equals, not conquerors. Transform your military-industrial complex into something that builds rather than destroys. Your engineering expertise could revolutionize civilian infrastructure. Your tactical knowledge could be applied to disaster response and crisis management. The Hegemony Council will never agree to this. Won't they? Kira brought up a final display. 17 of your 23 council members have children studying at cooperative universities. 12 have private investments in cooperative trade ventures. 8 have already sent unofficial representatives to discuss terms. She let that sink in before continuing. Change is coming, Admiral, with or without the hegemony's approval. The question is whether you'll guide that change or be swept away by it. Vorakesh stood in silence for a long moment, his warrior's instincts warring with the undeniable logic of Kira's arguments. Around them, the summit continued, but with a noticeably different energy. Conversations were more open, delegates from different worlds mingling freely without the usual careful hierarchy. You humans, Vorakesh finally said, you conquered the galaxy without firing a single shot. We didn't conquer anything, Kira replied earnestly. We helped the galaxy conquer its own worst impulses. The same way we had to conquer ours. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was necessary. And if some refuse? If they choose the old ways? Kira's expression became somber. Then they'll face the same fate as every empire built on force alone. They'll exhaust themselves trying to hold back the tide of change. We won't need to fight them, time will do that for us. You're asking me to betray everything I've stood for, Vorakesh said. I'm asking you to evolve, Kira countered. To take everything you've learned about strategy, leadership, and organization and apply it to building something lasting. The hegemony could lead this transformation instead of being consumed by it. A younger hegemony officer approached nervously. Admiral, several of our member worlds are formally submitting applications to join the cooperative. Should I? Do nothing, Vorakesh said quietly. Then, louder, let them choose. Perhaps it's time we all chose. The young officer's eyes widened, but he nodded and retreated. This won't be easy, Vorakesh said to Kira. There are those in the hegemony who will see this as weakness. Change never is easy, Kira agreed. But consider this, in all your military campaigns, you've won glory that lasted a few decades at most. Lead this transformation successfully, and you'll be remembered for millennia as the warrior who had the courage to wage peace. 6 months after the Meridian Point Summit, Admiral Vorakesh stood before the Hegemony Council. The chamber, once filled with military banners and weapons of conquered worlds, now displayed holographic projections of construction projects, education initiatives, and cooperative ventures. The transformation is proceeding faster than projected, Vorakesh reported. 17 systems have successfully converted military infrastructure to civilian use. Economic indicators show 15% growth in the first quarter alone. And the resistance movements? Asked Councillor Thrakis, one of the old guard still skeptical of the changes. Down 82%, Vorakesh replied. It turns out people are less likely to rebel when they're prospering and have a voice in their governance. This still feels like surrender, Thrakis grumbled. Does it? Vorakesh challenged. We've expanded our influence to 12 new systems without firing a shot. Our technology exchange programs have yielded more innovations in 6 months than our conquest-based research did in 6 years. If this is surrender, perhaps we should have tried it sooner. The Chamber's communication system chimed. Ambassador Chen appeared in holographic form, smiling warmly. Council members, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to personally deliver the news that the Castori Restoration Project has been approved. With combined resources from the cooperative and the reformed hegemony, we project full biosphere restoration within 50 years. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The genocide of the Castori had been one of the hegemony's darkest moments. That's impossible, Councillor Thrakis stammered. The damage was too extensive. Impossible with military thinking, Kira agreed. But when you redirect those resources to life instead of death, remarkable things become possible. The project will also serve as a powerful symbol that no mistake is irreversible if we're willing to work together to fix it. The Castori survivors have agreed to return? Vorakesh asked. Many have, Kira confirmed. They see it as a chance to rebuild, to prove that creation is stronger than destruction. Several have even volunteered to work with former hegemony forces on the restoration. They say forgiveness is a more powerful weapon than any plasma cannon. As years passed, the transformation initiated at Meridian Point spread throughout the galaxy like ripples on a cosmic pond. Former military powers discovered that the same strategic thinking that had made them effective conquerors could make them exceptional builders and organizers. The hegemony's engineering corps, once dedicated to siege warfare, became the galaxy's premier disaster response team. Their ability to rapidly deploy resources and establish command structures saved millions of lives when natural disasters struck. The Altarian fleet, known for their swift attack vessels, transformed their ships into the galaxy's most efficient medical response units, bringing aid to systems in crisis with unprecedented speed. Even the isolationist Zorath the Empire, watching the prosperity of their neighbors, began tentative diplomatic overtures. Kira Chen, now in her 70s, stood once again at Meridian Point, but this time for a very different gathering. The station had been expanded into a massive educational complex where young beings from hundreds of worlds came to study cooperation, conflict resolution, and sustainable development. The ambassador, a young human student, approached her. "I'm writing a thesis on the transformation period. Could I ask you something?" "Of course," Kira replied warmly. "In your original presentation to Admiral Vorakesh, you made it sound like humanity had all the answers, like we were teaching the galaxy. But in your private writings you mention learning as much as teaching. Could you explain?" Kira chuckled. "Perceptive question. You're right, we didn't have all the answers. What we had was perspective born from nearly destroying ourselves. We knew the patterns to avoid because we'd lived them. But the solutions, those came from everyone." She gestured to the diverse crowd of students around them. "The hegemony taught us about large-scale organization. The Altarians showed us how to adapt quickly to changing circumstances. The cooperative worlds demonstrated sustainable economics. Even the species we helped liberate taught us about resilience and forgiveness. So humanity's role was to be the catalyst," Kira finished. "Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to say there's another way for others to realize they knew it all along. We didn't conquer the galaxy or save it. We helped it save itself." 25 years after the Meridian Point Summit, the galaxy bore little resemblance to its former self. Where once vast fleets patrolled borders, now trade ships carried goods and ideas freely between systems. Former military academies had become centers of learning where strategic thinking was applied to solving complex social and environmental challenges. Admiral Vorakesh, now bearing the title Director General of the Galactic Reconstruction Initiative, stood on the restored surface of Castoria Prime. Around him, Castori and former hegemony engineers worked side by side, their children playing together in newly grown forests. "You were right," he said to the elderly human woman beside him. Kira Chen, despite her age, had insisted on attending the restoration ceremony. "About what specifically?" she asked with a knowing smile. "About legacy. My military victories are already forgotten footnotes in history. But this," he gestured to the thriving world around them, "this will be remembered." "Not just remembered," Kira corrected gently. "Built upon. Each generation will add to what we started, improve on our mistakes, reach further than we imagined possible. That's the difference between conquest and creation. One ends with you, the other continues forever." A young Castori child ran up to them, offering each a flower from the newly restored gardens. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of them, life returning to a world once thought permanently dead. Ambassador Vorakesh said formally, "I owe you an apology. When we first met, I dismissed humanity as weak, naive newcomers playing at diplomacy." "No apology needed," Kira replied. "You saw what we wanted you to see. Sometimes the greatest strength is letting others underestimate you until the moment they're ready to listen." "Still manipulating even now?" Vorakesh asked with something approaching humor. "Still teaching," Kira corrected. "The manipulation was just the wrapper to make the lesson palatable. Your species respects strength, so we had to show strength. But true strength, not just the ability to destroy." And now the galaxy teaches itself. The cooperative isn't led by humans, it's led by everyone. We were just the opening act. As the restoration ceremony concluded, delegates from across the galaxy gathered for what would be Kira Chen's final public address. Age had finally caught up with humanity's architect of peace, but her mind remained sharp as ever. "When I was young," she began, her voice carried across the plaza by advanced acoustics, "I studied our ancient history. Humans had a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. For millennia, we believed this. We prepared for war so thoroughly that we nearly ended ourselves." She paused, looking out at the incredibly diverse crowd species that had been enemies now standing together as allies. "But we learned something. If you prepare for war, you'll find it. If you prepare for peace, truly prepare, with the same dedication, resources, and strategic thinking once reserved for destruction, you'll find that instead. The galaxy stands transformed not because humanity had some special wisdom, but because we shared our special failure. We showed everyone what the endpoint of the warrior's path looked like and offered a different road. A young voice called out from the crowd, "What's next for the galaxy?" Kira smiled. "I don't know. Isn't that wonderful? For the first time in galactic history, our future isn't determined by who has the biggest fleet or the most powerful weapons. It's determined by who has the best ideas, the most compassion, the greatest willingness to help others succeed. We've ended the age of empires and begun the age of possibilities. What comes next is up to all of you." She stepped back from the podium to thunderous applause from 1,000 different species. Vorakesh offered her his arm for support, which she accepted gracefully. "One last manipulation?" he asked quietly. "One last truth," she replied. "The future was always in their hands. We just helped them realize it." In a classroom aboard the Orbital University of New Castoria, a professor lectured on ancient galactic history. Her students, a mix of species that would have been unimaginable in one room during the Empire Age, listened with fascination to tales of a time when beings fought for dominance rather than competing to contribute. "The transformation period teaches us that change is possible at any scale," the professor explained. An entire galactic civilization shifted from competition through destruction to competition through creation. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't easy, but it was achieved. "Professor," a student asked, "could we ever go back? Could the galaxy return to the old ways?" The professor considered this. History suggests that any progress can be reversed. But look around you. Every species in this room has ancestral memories of the Empire Age. We keep those memories not as glorification but as warning. We study the past not to repeat it, but to appreciate how far we've come. More importantly, she continued, we've discovered something the Empire builders never understood. Cooperation isn't just morally superior to conquest, it's more effective. The combined output of our peaceful galaxy exceeds anything the old empires achieved through force. Why would we go back to an inferior system? Another student raised a tentacle. What about species from beyond our galaxy? What if they come with the old thinking, with fleets and weapons? Then we'll do what humanity did with us, the professor replied with a smile. We'll let them underestimate us. We'll show them patience, demonstrate alternatives, and wait for them to realize what we've learned. The most powerful force in the universe isn't a weapon, it's an idea whose time has come. And if they don't learn, then they'll face the same fate as every empire before them. They'll exhaust themselves against the simple reality that cooperation creates more than conquest ever could. We won't need to defeat them. Mathematics will do it for us. The class ended, and students filed out to continue their studies, future diplomats, builders, thinkers, and dreamers. In the hallway, a holographic portrait of an elderly human woman smiled down at them. With a simple inscription, Kira Chen, she taught us that the pen is mightier than the sword. But a friendship is mightier than both. The galaxy had learned its lesson well. The age of empires was over. The age of possibilities had just begun.